The older I get, the less I like talking to the average person about music. And it's not because I hate music or I don't care about music anymore. I'm still passionate about music. I still make music. But it's because after hearing casual music fans make basic and at times just straight up false points based on their limited knowledge, you start to get annoyed and just disappointed. And so you really just want to talk to people about it less. I still have my thoughts and opinions on a lot of stuff, but it to me in a lot of cases it almost doesn't make sense to even try to go back and forth with certain people on certain topics. That's the reason I wanted to start recording myself talking about these topics for the few diehard music fans that might still be out there who might stumble on this and get in general. It's still just again just to talk to myself. That's why you're hearing now me do an episode of what I'm calling the Talking to Myself podcast. My name is Emphasis, by the way, but the main topic of this video was Charleston White because I believe Charleston White is a good example of what I just mentioned, like the casual music fan that I was referring to, right? Now he had some good points that he made in the interview with Say Cheese, but in general, I'll get to that later. But there was also a lot of nonsense that he said that I just wanted to kind of go in on. So to start out, he said you can't market a 30-year-old rapper. Now, that's cap. I'm calling cap on that. If you're competent, you can market anything. Only lazy people want to market low-hanging fruit. And when I say low-hanging fruit, that kind of sounds like a reach, but like in general, you have a lot of labels and independent companies that fund a lot of artists, but again, they target artists that they assume will be very easy to sell, or in other words, they're focusing on superficial stuff instead of focusing on just straight up just the talent. You got people focusing on a superficial look of what they think will work. So like they'll look at a certain artist, and if that artist looks a certain way, they'll be quicker to want to try to push them to the forefront. Or if that artist doesn't look a certain way and isn't a certain age, like under 30 in the case of Charleston White saying this, they're gonna just feel like, oh, it's not gonna be worth the trouble, it's not gonna pop off. This is why for years you had talented artists like Missy Elliott or like Evelyn Champagne King or whoever, like, who weren't really given a shot initially because they didn't have what labels considered the right look. So they just rather just use their talent behind the scenes to try to help other people pop off. But the funny thing about music and content is you don't know what people actually like. Like, you got to give people a chance to try different things, right? Now, granted, most people are followers, so you really don't have to worry about that. And that's really why a lot of these labels try to focus on what they believe will work and then just push it so hard, because they know if they just sell you an image that something's already popular, that it will just pop off. But nonetheless, there is a certain amount of people out there who are, free thinkers. They move to the beat of their own drum, and they're open-minded people. They'll give almost anything a chance, right? So, and when it comes to me, that's the most important demographic, not just as far as music fans, but just in life, but definitely as far as music fans. And again, like I said, you can't predict what they're gonna like, which is why this approach of you can't market a rapper beyond 30 or anything like that. Again, I just think it's a lazy mindset, because it's basically saying that you don't want to actually do the hard work for any label or A&R or whoever. That's basically saying you don't want to do the hard work of actually trying to sit down and analyze a person's talent and see how you could really put your marketing skills to the test and actually take a risk. 'Cause, like, they really don't want to do that. Now, someone like me, I'm 27 years old, so I'm not 30, but obviously, as you can imagine, I'm getting close. and I still like making music. I enjoy making music. My goal has never been to be a signed artist. My goal has always been to just be a thriving indie artist who can, comfortably make a living and all that. Just comfortably make a, I do other stuff, but comfortably make a living just strictly off music, which I believe most people who are indie artists, that's ultimately their goal, right? So I don't think a lot of as much as I'm about to critique this guy Charleston White, I don't think a lot of this stuff applies to the average indie artist who's like funding their own music and all that. I think this more so applies to artists who are still hoping that they could end up on 106 in Park, even though 106 in Park has been canceled for like, I don't know, more or less a decade. But moving on, man. Still to go back to that first point, you can market anybody. Saying that you can't market a 30-year-old rapper is crazy. Like if you're good at marketing, which most of these people and labels are not, you could market anybody, but that's the problem. They're not good at what they do, but they still get put in a certain position that validates them as if they are good. But I don't know. That may be a conversation for another day. But as Charleston White kept going on and on in this interview to back up him saying you can't be a 30-year-old rapper or whatever, he said you got to be ready to crash out. A few of your partners have to be ready to go to jail. Which and then also he said in your 20s you were known in the streets for rapping. By now you probably have a kid and a woman. A big part of those two statements, he said, this is a big part of the problem I have with trying to talk to the average person about music, especially about like hip hop specifically, is a lot of people have a very warped he has a very warped perception of what a rapper is. Do you guys know what a rapper is? I'll tell you, it's very simple, but I feel like most people still don't get it. A rapper is somebody who raps. That's it. It's literally that simple. But in his mind and in a lot of other people's minds, they're so warped to where they think a rapper is somebody who was selling drugs, who committed a bunch of crimes, who comes from this terrible life background that has this awful origin story, and they just happen to make a song. Like that's a lot of people think that street rappers are the only type of rappers that exist, when in reality street rappers are actually a small segment of hip hop, but it just so happens that they get promoted the most. But again, there's so many other type of rappers, but people like Charleston and many others, they can't wrap their heads around this. They don't, for whatever reason, they don't have either the awareness or the mental capacity to wrap their heads around the fact that street rappers aren't the only rappers that exist. Not everybody rapping or making hip hop music makes street music or has a street image. Like people like this are lazy, and I've ranted about this before, and I'm gonna keep ranting about this probably forever. People like this who throw these opinions out there like this, they're lazy and they only listen to what's on the radio. So because lazy people like Charleston White only listen to the stuff that's presented to him on the radio, which 99% of the radio is just, or excuse me, 99% of like hip hop radio is just street artists, it's just street rappers. You're not going to hear a bunch of diversity on the radio. And because he's lazy and open minded, and people like him are lazy and open minded, they're not going to go out of their way to explore and listen and go on the internet and find all the different artists that are out there who make a wide range of music. They're not going to bother. And people like this in his head and people like him in their head, they still haven't even noticed that, hey, when you listen to the radio, they play the same 8 songs for 24 hours straight for the entire year. But do you really think that there are only 8 songs in all of hip hop music within the entire year? Of course not. There's millions of songs being released every day amongst all genres. But again, people like that, they don't get that there's plenty of other types of rap out there. There are people who make what would be considered like conscious rap, right? There are people who are into more so like storytelling rap. There are people who do like what may be considered horrorcore rap, right? There are people who do Christian rap. There are people who do very like quirky, out there sort of concepts type of raps where it's almost meant to be something that would be more enjoyable if you were like smoking weed or doing like mushrooms or something like that. But it's still like super lighthearted and just meant to be something that plays in the background. There are people who big rap that sound great at a barbecue. Like a lot of Dom Kennedy's music sounds really good at a barbecue. I don't know if Dom Kennedy does that on purpose, but it's true. A lot of Currency's music, it sounds really good when you're driving around in your car, right? Or if you just so happen to be smoking weed, but especially if you're just driving around in your car. And I think Currency did that on purpose. He's passionate about cars, right? He may purposely make music he just wants to ride out to. You listen to somebody like Tierra Whack, a lot of her music is kind of like her style is kind of like quirky and a little out there, right? But it's still unique to her. Like and obviously those are just a few examples, but there's so many different lanes of rappers out there. But if you only want to listen to one style, how can you have the audacity to try to give your opinion on a genre that you clearly don't listen to like that? I don't care how much radio songs you listen to. If the only thing you listen to is the radio and the most popular playlist on Spotify, like Rap Caviar or whatever, you ain't really listening like that. And then these will be the same people that'll have the strongest opinions about what rappers are or what hip hop music is, and it's crazy. But either way, continuing on to Charleston White's interview. As far as he did make a couple of fair points that because I'm fair, I have to give him credit on. When he brought up the Two Chains example, right? Because when this conversation about older rappers comes up, inevitably Two Chains will come up, right? Because he is a success story of, even though he was already in that industry, like in the mainstream industry from a very young age when he signed with Ludacris and Disturbing the Peace back when he was with the group Player Circle. So he had already been plugged into a degree, but as far as him being reinvented and rebranded as Two Chains and blowing up, like officially blowing up like for real on his own, that obviously didn't happen until like his like mid-30s during like the 2010s. But Charleston White brought up a good example that Two Chains met Eminem's manager. How? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's still a good point that luck to some degree does matter, right? Because Two Chains was already in those type of circles to where he could find himself in a position where he just somehow managed to meet and connect and start to work with Eminem's manager, right? He also made the point that it's a young man's sport, but an old man's business. And then he says, "Hey, what have you learned? What have you learned along the way that could help you either start your own label or start ghostwriting for people or start figuring out some other lanes that you could pivot in, which within the music space?" Which again, to his credit, that is a good point. Like I I and many people have definitely thought about what we have learned along the way and try to figure out how you could apply this to any sort of business outside of music or even within music. Because again, if to go a long period of time without learning anything at all and trying to figure out how it could apply to other areas would be crazy. But another point I just want to go back to as far as this topic of this video related to the concept of, hey, rapping or music, hip hop isn't a young man, it's a young man sport and stuff like that. Like, I don't like that people only emphasize this when it comes to hip hop, because at the end of the day, in America, pop culture as a whole emphasizes youth. That's not just a hip hop thing. That's all of pop culture in America. You look at whether it's pop music, whether it's any genre of music, pop music, country music, whatever, like rock music, whether you look at even outside of music, when you look at like Hollywood, when it comes to movies and TV shows and all that stuff, all of it emphasizes youth. I mean, there's a reason that so many of these celebrities are getting like Botox and BBLs and all these crazy surgeries to try to not only look a certain way, but also to try to look as young and youthful and tight as possible. It's because America emphasizes youth so much. Not just America, but in this case, most of the people listen are probably in America, right? So America as a whole, not just hip hop, pop culture in America as a whole emphasizes youth. That's not just a hip hop thing really, but it also makes sense why in many industries especially in pop culture they emphasize youth so much, right? Because a lot of people who are younger and who are more desperate and who may be street dudes, right? To bring it back to the conversation about like street rappers you hear on the radio or signing these crazy deals, like these 360 deals, a lot of them are more inclined to take a bad deal because again they're in a more desperate situation. And even if you're not a street dude, like we've all, well, not all of us, but many people in America at some point or another may have just been in a tight spot financially where they may have had to take a bad deal that they may consciously be aware of is a bad deal, but they just may be in a position where it's just like they just have to take it, or they at least feel like they have to take it. But it is funny though that after all the like all the junk after all the junk that Charleston was talking, all the crap he was talking, he still himself he still himself admitted that he wished he could rap. Like he said himself that if he could rap, he would be 46 years old right now trying to rap. But it is what it is. Another good point that he did bring up is that labels want to sign you once these days a lot of labels they only want to sign artists or especially rappers once they already have blew up on their own and once they already have money, which again is a good point. That is true. Another point that he brought up that was fair was when he said, why do you want to be a rapper? It doesn't pay, which is a fair point. But again, people like him, they're so used to seeing only like street rappers in the mainstream who many of these people, whenever you hear them talk about music, they're clearly not that passionate about it and they clearly don't care too much about doing it. But to them, it's like a quick hustle, you know what I mean? So and from that perspective, it does make sense of, hey, why would you want to do that if you want a quick hustle when it really doesn't pay well or it really doesn't pay quickly? But again, a lot of people like him are overlooking the fact that some people are just genuinely passionate about it. Like I do genuinely enjoy writing. I do genuinely enjoy rapping. I do genuinely enjoy, rhyming words and doing all this stuff. Even though I get so busy now with other stuff, but that's still the main thing that I would like to do, obviously. Then he also brought up a point that as he was saying that, hey, it doesn't pay to rap, he also said in many cases, you have to be the one to pay to rap. Now, that's it. That is also a good point. I know from experience that there have been many, like just even in my own career, on my own journey, I've paid a lot of money. You might listen to this right now and think, okay, well, this person isn't popular, like he doesn't know what he's talking about, but you don't know. I put in a lot of money, whether it's in the studio time, whether it's paying to get a album cover done, whether it's paying to run ads on YouTube and Instagram or whatever else, whether it's trying to go do like one of those pay for play shows or whether it's any one of those things. Even my own experience, I've paid like thousands of dollars into all this different stuff, right? And it's had some level of success as far as like combined. I think I got more or less 100,000 streams or whatever. But what does that really matter when that money is like those streams may have added up to like maybe like $500, maybe less. You know what I mean? Like so, it really like you many artists do find themselves in a position where they put more in than they get out, which obviously sucks. But it is what it is again. But that goes back to when he asked, "Hey, why are you doing it, or why do you want to do it?" Again, some people, just genuinely just passionate about it to the point where they're willing to invest all they got or most of what they got just to give it a shot, just to know for a fact that they gave it their best shot. Now, one last point that he made that I want to acknowledge is when he said, when he followed up the statements I just said about, hey, why do you want to be a rapper? It doesn't pay. He made one more point that I thought was good when he said, why not put that energy into making content? Content creators are making more money than most rappers. Now, that actually is a very good point. And I also when you look around, a lot of artists have already acknowledged that, and they're trying one way or another to pivot, right? Like you see a lot of artists are starting podcasts. Like I started a podcast. I do this, and then also obviously I do a sports channel that ironically the sports channel gets way more views consistently than this channel does. And I've never ran any ads on that channel. I just, talk about my favorite sports team and then just leave it at that. But there's a lot of artists that are trying to switch into podcasting. You got artists like T Grizzly. He's like pretty much switched into gaming. He's allegedly making like 100,000 a month just off of live streaming, playing games and stuff like that. Like people are switching into making content. Maybe not as much as they should, but they are. But that is something that as an artist and as a creative person, you do have to start to consider is just trying to figure out all the different ways that you could just start channeling your creative energy into something else. Because as he pointed out, like music, not just rap, but music in general, like it, it's tough to make that money back quickly, especially when you got to invest so much into yourself. But that's pretty much all I got for this video. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Do you think he has a point? Do you think he's completely wrong? And what age do you think would be the cutoff point for somebody who's rapping? And also, do you think it's a good idea for rappers or musicians of in general to start to look into other areas, especially if they're an independent artist, like look into other areas, other creative areas that they could pivot into, like content creation?